Sometimes moving into a new place feels like starting fresh, a new chapter. But what if the walls themselves don't want you there? What if someone or something is already watching? The Move My name is Daniel. I'm 31, recently single, and when I moved into my new apartment last fall, I told myself it was a chance to reset. The place wasn't much. Small, cramped, tucked in the middle of a crumbling building downtown. But it was cheap, and at that point in my life, cheap was all I could afford. I carried the last box into my apartment, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and shut the door. The hallway outside was eerily quiet, too quiet for a building that supposedly had over 30 tenants. At first, I chalked it up to timing. Maybe people were at work. Maybe they kept it to themselves. But that silence never really went away. The first glimpse. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the radiator. Then, around 2 a.m., I noticed it. Through the half-closed blinds of my bedroom window, a light flickered on across the street. At first, it was nothing unusual. People leave lights on all the time, but this one felt deliberate. The room across from mine, directly across, had one single lamp, casting a pale yellow glow, and in that glow, I saw the outline of someone, a figure standing perfectly still, facing my window. I froze. My first thought was that it was just a trick of the light. Maybe they were moving around their apartment, and it only looked like they were staring. But no, this figure didn't move, not an inch, just stood there, facing me, watching. I yanked the blinds shut and told myself I was being paranoid, but even with the blinds closed, I felt it, the weight of eyes pressing against me. The next day, the next morning, I tried to laugh it off. New apartment, unfamiliar noises, tired brain, that's all. I went to work, came back, heated up leftover pizza, and sat on the couch with a beer. But when the sun went down, I caught myself glancing toward the window again. Sure enough, around the same time as the night before, 2 a.m., the light across the street clicked on, and there it was, the figure, still as stone, facing me. My chest tightened. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Whoever lived there, they knew exactly which window was mine. The silence in the halls. The following day, I decided to ask around. Maybe it was just some creepy old tenant. Maybe people in the building knew about him. But when I stepped into the hallway, I realized how empty the building really felt. The carpet was worn, the walls stained yellow with time, and the overhead lights buzzed faintly. I walked the length of the hall, listening. Nothing. No voices. No TVs. No music. I knocked on the door next to mine. No answer. Tried another. Nothing. It was as if the entire building was abandoned, except for me. The third night, that night, I told myself I wouldn't look. I kept the blinds shut tight, turned on the TV, tried to drown out my thoughts with old sitcom reruns. But sometime after midnight, I woke up on the couch. The TV screen was black. I didn't remember turning it off. The apartment was silent, except for the faintest click. I turned my head slowly toward the window. The blinds were open. I swear to God, I had closed them. And across the street, the figure was there again, closer this time, not just a silhouette, but the faint outline of a face. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then, the light in that apartment across the street went out, leaving only the darkness. And that was only the beginning. I had moved into my new apartment to escape my problems, but what waited for me? There wasn't loneliness. It was attention that I could neither explain nor escape, because once something starts watching you, it never stops. Sometimes the worst sounds are the ones you can't quite place. too soft to identify, too close to ignore. The walls, the night after I saw the face for the first time, I barely slept. Every creak of the pipes, every groan of the floorboards made me jump. At around 3 a.m., I heard it. Something different. Not the radiator, not the wind. A sound coming from inside the wall. At first, it was faint, like scratching, nails dragging slowly along wood. Then came the whispering, too muffled to make out words, but clear enough that it wasn't in my head. I pressed my ear to the wall. The whispers stopped. I pulled back, waited, and then, so close it felt like it was right behind the plaster. Daniel, my blood ran cold. No one in this building knew my name. I hadn't spoken to a single soul since moving in. The phone call. The next day, I tried to push it out of my mind. Lack of sleep, imagination, stress. I worked late, got home around 11, and was halfway through a beer when my phone rang. The number was unknown. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something about the silence in my apartment made me answer. Hello? Nothing. Just faint static. Who is this? Then, a low whisper, barely audible through the crackle. Look outside. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I turned toward the window. Across the street, the light in that apartment flicked on. The figure was there. But this time, it wasn't standing still. It raised its hand. Slowly, deliberately, and waved. I dropped the phone. The call ended on its own. The locked doors. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed into the hallway, determined to find a neighbor, someone who could explain this, tell me I wasn't losing my mind. The hallway was colder than my apartment, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. I tried the door next to mine again. Locked. No sound inside. I walked down to the end of the hall. Another door. I knocked hard. No answer. I grabbed the knob. Locked. Every door I tried was the same. Locked. Silent. I realized with a sick twist in my gut that I hadn't actually seen a single person in this building since moving in. Not one. It was like I was the only tenant. The second voice. I went back into my apartment, heart racing. I double-locked the door, shoved a chair under the knob, and sat on the couch with the TV on for background noise. But sometime after midnight, I heard it again. The scratching, the whispering. This time, it wasn't from the wall. It was from inside my apartment. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. Then, out of the corner of the room, just beyond the glow of the TV, I heard it. He sees you too. The remote slipped from my hand. I spun, staring into the corner. Nothing, just shadows. I turned the lights on, shaking, every muscle in my body tense. The room was empty, but the smell of dust and mildew was stronger there, in that corner, as if something had been standing there for a very long time. The figure across the street wasn't just watching anymore. Something inside my own apartment had joined him, and no matter how tightly I locked my doors, I couldn't keep the voices out. It's one thing to feel watched. It's another to realize the watcher isn't hiding anymore, that they want you to see. The ritual. 3 nights after the phone call, I woke up to something strange. Light. A faint, pulsing glow seeped through the blinds, not steady like a lamp, not sharp like headlights. This was rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I crept to the window and peeked through the slats. The apartment across the street was blazing with light, but it wasn't just one lamp anymore. Candles, dozens of them, flickering in a circle around the figure. The person, or whatever it was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by symbols drawn in something dark. From this distance, it looked like words, but they weren't English. The figure raised its hands and began to sway, and though I couldn't possibly hear from across the street, I swear I felt the sound, low, vibrating, like a hum rattling inside my chest. The drawing the next morning, I woke up groggy, my head pounding. On the kitchen table, there was something that hadn't been there before. A piece of paper, my handwriting, but I hadn't written it. The page was covered in symbols, the same ones I had seen on the floor of the apartment across the street, and in the center of the page, one word, scribbled over and over until the paper nearly tore, welcome. My stomach turned. Someone had been inside my apartment while I slept. The hallway encounter. That evening, I decided I couldn't take the silence anymore. I needed to see a living person in this building. Anyone. I left my apartment and walked the halls again. Halfway down the second floor, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Just ahead. Finally, I thought. Another tenant. I quickened my pace and turned the corner. There was a man standing at the end of the hallway. Tall, thin, his back to me. He didn't move. Didn't turn when I called out. Hey, excuse me. He slowly tilted his head, not turning fully, just tilting, and then stepped into a doorway. When I reached the spot, the door he'd entered was bricked shut, not locked, not boarded, bricked, as if no door had ever been there. The return to the window. That night, I promised myself I wouldn't look again, but at 2 a.m., my eyes opened on their own, like something had called me. The blinds were already open. The apartment across the street glowed with candlelight again. This time, the figure wasn't alone. There were others, at least 5 of them, standing in a circle, heads bowed. And all at once, they raised their arms and pointed at my window, at me. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. I wasn't just being watched. I was being chosen, and the apartment across the street wasn't just occupied. It was alive with something ancient, something that had already pulled me into its circle. Insanity doesn't announce itself. It creeps in quietly until you can't tell what's real and what's just your reflection breaking in the glass. The voice in the room. That night, I sat in my living room with every light on. I swore I wouldn't look out the window again. I kept the blinds shut, the curtains drawn. At around 2:15 a.m., it started. The whisper. But this time, it wasn't outside. It was inside. Soft, right behind my ear. Daniel. I spun around so fast, I knocked over a lamp. The apartment was empty. No movement. No shadows. My heart hammered. And then, like a cruel joke, I heard it again. Clearer. Closer. Daniel. Welcome back. The Scratchiesy didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, gripping a kitchen knife like it would protect me. At sunrise, I finally stood and stretched. That's when I saw it. The wall, right by my bedroom door. Scratches. Dozens of them, carved deep into the plaster. Not random. Words. Look deeper. My breath caught. I hadn't made those marks, and they weren't there yesterday. The Wally spent the next hour staring at the wall. The words, the plaster, something about them gnawed at me. Finally, I grabbed a hammer. I started to chip away. Each strike echoed through the empty apartment, like a gunshot. Behind the plaster, there was space, hollow. I pulled chunks of wall free until I had made a hole big enough to crawl through, and what I found made my blood run cold. A hidden passage, narrow, dark, running straight through the walls of the building. The hidden corridor he crawled inside with a flashlight. The air was stale, heavy with dust, and something metallic, like dried blood. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes narrowing so much I had to squeeze sideways. And then I reached it, a peephole. I leaned forward, pressed my eye to it. It looked straight into the apartment across the street, the one I thought I'd been watching from my own window. But here's the thing. This wasn't across the street. This was inside my own building. The face, as I stared through the peephole, the candles flickered to life. Figures stepped into the circle again, hooded, silent, and then one of them turned. Its hood slipped back just enough for me to see a face, my face, grinning. The figure raised a hand and placed it directly on the wall where my peephole was, as if it could see me too. And I swear, from the other side of the wall, I heard my own voice whisper, "You finally found us." The apartment across the street wasn't across the street at all. It was here, inside these walls, and whatever was living in it had been waiting for me. Curiosity doesn't just kill the cat. It starves the soul until you have no choice but to follow it into the dark, deeper into the walls. I should have sealed the hole, pretended it wasn't there, but something in me needed to know. So that night, with nothing but my flashlight and the knife I refused to put down, I slipped back into the hidden passage. The deeper I went, the colder the air became. My breath fogged in front of me, and the further I walked, the more the walls changed. At first, just rough wood and plaster, then scratches, handprints, smears of something dark and flaking, and then words carved into the beams in shaky, desperate handwriting. Don't follow them. It's not an apartment. It's a hunger. The room with no door. After what felt like hours of crawling, I reached another opening, a wide space hidden between the walls. It wasn't empty. Furniture, a table, a chair, a mattress on the floor. Someone had been living here. On the table sat stacks of notebooks. I picked one up, flipped through, page after page, filled with drawings of the same building, my building. But every window was blacked out except one, my apartment, and scrawled across the margins of every page was a single sentence, over and over. He always comes back. The descent at the far side of the room, there was a staircase. Old, wooden. It shouldn't have been there. I hesitated, but then I heard it, chanting, low, rhythmic, the same hum I'd felt shaking in my chest nights ago. It was coming from below. I gripped the railing and began to descend. Each step creaked under my weight. The chanting grew louder, layered with whispers, until it sounded like dozens of voices, all speaking at once. And just as I reached the bottom, the flashlight flickered. The ceremony, the basement, stretched out into a vast, impossible chamber. Candles lined the walls, casting jagged shadows across stone pillars that couldn't possibly exist under a city building. And in the center of the chamber, figures, dozens of them, hooded, silent. They stood in a circle around a massive hole in the ground, blacker than shadow, as if light itself refused to touch it. And at the very edge of that hole, one figure lifted its hood. It was me, the calling. The other, me, smiled, lips stretching too wide, and in a voice that rattled inside my skull, he spoke, "We've been waiting. We always wait, and you always return." The hooded figures turned in unison, their hidden faces tilting toward me. And then the chanting stopped. The silence was worse than the noise, because in that silence, I heard something else, something rising from the pit. Not a voice, not words, but breathing, heavy, wet, hungry. Narrator voice. End of part 5. It wasn't just about the apartment. It wasn't just about me. Whatever lived beneath this building had been feeding for years, and now it wanted me to take my place. When the abyss looks back, it doesn't use eyes, it uses hunger. The breath from below, the sound swelled from the pit, breathing, ragged, monstrous, each inhale pulling the air tight against my skin, each exhale coating me with a damp heat. The hooded figures swayed. My double stood at the edge, smiling, as if presenting me to whatever waited below. I tried to move, to run, but my legs felt nailed to the stone floor. The flashlight flickered, then died completely. The chamber went dark, and in that darkness, something began to climb. The hand. The first thing I felt wasn't sight, it was touch. A hand, cold, slick, impossibly long. It slid across my ankle, curling around it with a grip that made my bones ache. I screamed and kicked, but it didn't let go. Instead, another hand joined it, then another, dozens of fingers, wrapping, pulling. From the pit, a shape emerged, not a body, not even flesh. It was shadow, thick, pulsing, alive, and inside that shadow, faces, hundreds of them, screaming, mouths open wide, but no sound coming out. And then one face pressed forward, clearer than the rest. It was mine, the offering. My double spoke again, voice booming in the chamber. He accepts, he always accepts, and now he will take his place. The hooded figures dropped to their knees, chanting in unison. The sound pounded inside my skull until I thought my head would split. The shadow's hands tightened around my body, dragging me toward the pit. I fought, clawed at the stone floor, nails tearing, but every movement only pulled me closer. The vision, just as I reached the edge, the world shifted. The chamber dissolved. Suddenly, I was standing back in my apartment. Bright, clean, quiet. Had I imagined it? Had I fallen asleep? But then I saw the mirror. Every reflection, on the TV screen, on the window glass, even in the shine of the microwave, wasn't me. It was him, the other me. And he was smiling. The choice. The whispers filled the room again, but now they weren't whispers. They were words, dozens of voices all layered together, speaking directly to me. Step in, or let him take your place. My chest tightened, my hands shook. The other me raised a hand in the reflection and beckoned. Behind me, I felt the cold air of the hidden passage, still open, still waiting, and below it all, the sound of breathing, closer now, almost inside the walls of my apartment. I thought I had reached the bottom, but the truth is, the pit had only just begun to open, and the worst part wasn't that something wanted me. It was that a part of me wanted it back. There's a moment when fear stops being about survival and starts being about surrender. The knocking. The night after the vision, I tried to block everything out. I shoved furniture against the hole in the wall, taped the blinds shut, blasted the TV just to drown out the whispers. For a few hours, it almost worked, until the knocking started. Not on the door, not on the walls, from inside the walls. Knock, knock, knock. Each strike rattled the frame of the apartment, dust falling from the ceiling. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it kept going, steady, deliberate. And then, 3 knocks came from the inside of my bedroom closet. The closet-y didn't want to open it. God, I didn't. But the silence after the knocks was worse. I gripped the handle, pulled it open, expecting darkness. Instead, the closet was lit by candles. The same circle, the same symbols scrawled on the floor, and standing in the middle, me, not smiling this time, not beckoning, just staring, eyes black and hollow. You can't shut us out, he whispered. You already let us in. The infection eye stumbled back, slammed the door shut. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might tear through my ribs. But when I looked at my hands, I froze. Dark stains spread across my skin. Black veins crawling up my arms like ink spilled beneath the flesh. I scrubbed. I clawed. Nothing helped. The veins pulsed with every beat of my heart, and with every pulse, I heard it again. The breathing. Not in the walls this time. Inside me. The neighbory needed help. Anyone. So I did what I hadn't done since moving in. I knocked on a neighbor's door. Apartment 3B. After a long silence, the door cracked open. An old woman stood there, frail, with eyes that looked like they hadn't closed in years. Before I could speak, she whispered, "You should have never looked across the street." And then she slammed the door. The decision. That night, I sat on the floor, knife in hand, staring at my own reflection in the black screen of the TV. The other me smiled back. The veins on my arms burned, crawling higher toward my chest. The voices were louder than ever, all chanting one word: choose. Step into the ritual, or cut it out before it spreads. My hand trembled. The knife pressed against my skin, and in that moment, I realized the cruelest truth of all. This wasn't about fighting them. This was about deciding which version of me would survive. The apartment wasn't haunted. It wasn't cursed. It was a mirror, and now I had to decide whether to break it or become the thing staring back at me. Sometimes the scariest thing you can face is yourself, staring back with a smile that isn't yours. The mirror testy dragged every mirror in the apartment into the living room. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought if I could see them all at once, I could prove something, that I was still real. I sat in the center, surrounded by my own reflections. At first it worked, just me, pale, tired, terrified. But then, one by one, the reflections began to change, not all at once. Slowly, a smile here, a tilt of the head there, eyes that didn't blink when I did, until every mirror in the room showed a version of me that wasn't moving in sync anymore. And then, all together, they spoke. "We've been waiting for you to stop lying to yourself." The blackout, the lights in the apartment flickered, then died completely. The mirrors glowed faintly in the dark, as if lit from within. I scrambled to cover them with sheets, blankets, anything I could grab. But every time I turned around, the sheets were gone. The mirrors were bare again, and the figures inside weren't even pretending to be me anymore. They were taller, sharper, skin stretched too tight across their faces, smiles splitting wider and wider until they looked inhuman, and all of them pointed, not at me, at the closet. The closet opens. The door creaked, slow and deliberate. Candles flared to life. Inside again, casting shadows that danced across the floor. And then he stepped out. My double, perfectly me, down to the clothes I was wearing, except for the eyes. His were black, bottomless. He walked forward, knife in hand, the same kitchen knife I held. "You can't run from what you are," he whispered. "One of us has to stay." The struggle. He lunged. I blocked. Steel clashed against steel. Sparks flying in the dark. We fought across the apartment, smashing into walls, shattering glass. Every movement was mirrored. Every strike anticipated. It was like fighting a reflection that knew every thought before I had it. He pinned me against the wall, knife at my throat. His smile widened. "You've already let me in," he hissed. "All that's left is for you to let go." The revealee don't know where the strength came from, but I shoved him back, crashing him into one of the mirrors. The glass shattered, except there was no floor behind it, just darkness. endless and writhing. Hands reached out, dozens of them, clawing, pulling. They wrapped around my double, dragging him into the void. His eyes widened for the first time. He wasn't smiling anymore. "Don't fight it," he screamed, voice twisting into 100 overlapping tones. "If I go, you go too." And then he was gone. The mirror sealed shut. I thought I had won, that I had pushed him back into whatever abyss he came from. But the truth was, the abyss didn't take him. It took a piece of me, and I could already feel how much darker I had become. Darkness doesn't leave when you push it away. It lingers and waits for the cracks to open again. The quiet aftermath after the fight. The apartment was wrecked, broken glass everywhere, furniture overturned. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the knife anymore. For the first time in days, there was silence. No whispers, no chanting, no knocking, just silence. But the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like the pause before thunder. The stains I went to wash my hands, to scrub away the black veins still crawling beneath my skin. But when I turned on the faucet, the water ran dark. Not rust, not dirt. Blood, thick, clotted, pouring from the tap in steady streams. I stumbled back, gagging. The sink overflowed, spilling across the floor. And in the red reflection, I didn't see my own face anymore. I saw the pit, the return of the breath. That night, the breathing came back. Not muffled through walls, not distant below the building. It was in the room. Every corner of the apartment seemed to inhale and exhale, the walls expanding and contracting like lungs. I pressed my palms over my ears, but it didn't help, because the sound wasn't just in the room. It was inside my chest. My heartbeat had synced with the thing in the pit. The letters. In desperation, I tore through the apartment, searching for answers. And that's when I found it. A letter slipped under my door. No name, no address, just 4 words scrawled in jagged handwriting. "You are the ritual." My stomach dropped. I thought I had stumbled into some ancient ceremony, that I was a victim. But the truth was worse. I wasn't chosen. I was created. The neighbor again ran to the old woman's door in 3B, pounding until my fists bled. She finally opened it, just a crack, her eyes wide, wild with terror. Before I could speak, she whispered, "It doesn't matter if you fight him. You were never Daniel. You were always his reflection." And then she slammed the door again. The collapse back. In my apartment, the walls groaned, the floorboards buckled. The entire building was breathing now. Each inhale pulling me toward the closet, toward the hidden passage. The black veins across my arms pulsed, faster, harder, until I could barely stand. And then I heard the voice again, not whispers, not chanting, clear, direct, inside my skull. "Come back to where you belong." The closet door creaked open, candles lit themselves, and the staircase down into the dark waited for me. I thought I'd beaten him. I thought I had escaped, but I was wrong. The ritual was never about choice. It was about returning to the pit, and this time, I wasn't sure I wanted to resist. Every story has an ending. Some are happy, some are terrifying, and some leave you wondering if it ever truly ended at all. The descent. The closet door creaked open fully. The staircase glowed faintly, the candlelight from below licking the edges of the walls. I knew I should run. I knew I should stay. But every muscle, every thought, every heartbeat pulled me forward. Step by step, I descended into the darkness. The air was thick, metallic, sweet, like blood and earth mixed together. At the bottom, the chamber stretched out endlessly. Hooded figures lined the walls. silent and waiting. The pit yawned in the center, blacker than night itself, and there he was, my double, the final choice. He stepped forward, raising a hand toward me, his eyes, mine, blacker than any shadow I had ever seen. "This is where it ends," he said. "Take your place, or be erased." I gripped the knife tighter, feeling the black veins crawling further up my arms. My reflection shimmered in the pit's darkness. For a moment, I thought I could fight, but the air was alive, pulsing with hunger, the whispers merging into one voice. "Do not resist." And yet, a spark of something human, a fragment of who I was, refused to give in. The struggle. The fight wasn't physical, it was mental. I had to assert my will, hold on to my identity while the pit tried to rewrite me. The hooded figures chanted, my double lunged, shadows clawed at me from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. I screamed, stabbed at nothing, swung at reflections that weren't real, and then I focused on my memories, my life, the world outside this building. With one final push, I yanked the knife into the pit itself. The darkness shrieked, the chamber shook, my double screamed, a sound that split the walls apart. The aftermath. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my apartment. The walls were clean, the blinds were closed, the hidden passage gone. The black veins had receded, my hands were my own again. The apartment across the street was normal, empty, silent. Or at least, it seemed that way. I never looked at the mirrors the same. I never slept without a light on. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I swear I hear it. The soft, low breathing of something waiting, patient, watching. I survived, but the apartment didn't lose. And sometimes I wonder, maybe the pit never really lets go. Maybe it just waits for the next one who looks across the street.